Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's office hours. Once again, this week's we will be sharing topics that have been coming up in communications for districts. Today is May 20th. There are only about 10 days left of testing, so the end is approaching. Once again, this week we have a bunch of reminders with some new things sprinkled in. A few slides new that things have come up over the last week we want to let you know about. Please use the question feature of the GoToMeeting, and we'll address the questions as they come in via text response and possibly at the end via voice if there are any that are left over. Please also mute your microphones and be aware that this is being recorded today. And as usual, the PowerPoint is in the handout section of the GoToWebinar. Okay, so on the call today, our awesome team from CSDE Performance Office with all our contact information. Deirdre Ducharme is on today. Deirdre's gonna once again take care of some of the content towards the end of the office hours, and Janet Stuck is on, as well as Jeff Gregg. My name is Abe Christ, all from the Performance Office. Janet and Dee work on special populations, and Jeff on science and CTOS. Also from our office on the call, Christy Alberino, handling a lot of the appeals this year, actually all the appeals for Smarter and CTOS and CJA and science. So if you need appeal questions, there's Christy's email. Also on the call, Michelle Rosado handling behind the scenes today. Thank you, Michelle. Also our SAT program manager, as well as other things. Michelle's on the call as well. And also Marlene Chameroy, who if you call into our office, you're probably talking to Marlene, and Marlene is holding us together in the office. So also on the call today from our awesome assessment partner, Amber Benlian, Jen Cho, and Marie Musumeci. They're here to hear the questions that might come in. Their contact information is here once again. The phone number hasn't changed, email hasn't changed. Those of you that are attended in past weeks, you've heard these things before. So an update on the testing progress up to now. Where are we in terms of progress towards making it to our June 4th deadline? We are zooming. Almost 180,000 tests. More tests were started relative to last week. The week before was 200,000 between the two office hour dates. So we're up to a total of 593,000 tests started. Don't forget, June 4th is the completion window date. We started this week sending reminders. If your district is on the lower side for completion rates, you'll probably be getting little reminders that testing is ending. You know, there are some great reports on Tide, but we are monitoring things closely just to make sure everybody is on par to get close to completion here. Also, the number of tests completed is at about 560,000. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so in terms of what's kind of really new this week, the 2021 Testing and Learning Experience Survey. We had sent this all to district administrators a couple of days ago directly through an email, and it's going to be sent out in our student assessment news in the next day or so, so there will be information there. But what we're doing, it's a brief survey to students, and it asks questions about students' testing experience during Smarter, Math, and Science, or Math, ELA, and Science in grades 3 through 8 and 5, 8, and 11. The survey also asks questions about students' learning experiences for the 2021 school year. And so why are we doing the survey in the Performance Office? The data collected from the survey will help us to evaluate the comparability of scores between the tests administered remotely and those administered in person. And also the results will be used to study the impact of a student's learning model during the 2021 school year. So hybrid, in-person, or remote, and how that impacts any academic performance and growth. The survey is not mandatory. student participation across all grades and all tested grades and learning models is valuable and appreciated. We're already aware that many districts have already jumped on as of this morning. So thank you if your district has already started. We're tracking participation on that. And strong information will help us do this analysis as we pointed out. And in terms of expectations, what to expect in the survey, there are 9 questions on the survey. It should take about 10 minutes to complete, and it will remain open until 5 p.m. on June 18th, 2021. One of the things that has come up in terms of questions once we sent this survey out is, hey, what do those questions look like? We have created a PDF, and when we send out the student assessment news tomorrow, there will be a link to the PDF with all the questions, those 9 questions, just so you can see what's coming for your students. If you're very anxious to get that PDF, certainly you can email one of us this afternoon, and we'd be happy to send it to you. So again, the location of the survey is here. That's posted in the handouts. The location is also going to be in the student assessment news. The only thing the student will need is to enter their SACID and their first name in order to get into the survey. Again, we want to tie that student SACID with that entry for the survey. The survey, you don't need a secure browser. You can take it with Chrome or Firefox or Safari, and it does not necessarily need to be proctored, to be completed. So students, there is no manual really. Students just enter into the survey with their SACID and first name, and they're off and running. Be mindful too that the text-to-speech tool has also been made available to all survey participants to support greater independence for completion of the survey. Okay, so how about monitoring test completion? As I mentioned earlier, the window's closing, and it's very important to track district and school test completion status for students taking SMARTER, NGSS, CTAA, and CTOS. The monitoring test progress brochure that's linked here contains instructions for generating the test status reports, test status code reports, and the test completion rates in TIDE. These are great tools that should be used to track completion for students at both the district and school level. Additionally, also linked here is the Accessing Participation Reports brochure that provides instructions for how to extract participation reports from TIDE for CTAA and the eligibility form. There are also links to these in the student assessment news that will be sent out tomorrow. Okay, you've seen this slide before too in weeks past. We've sort of reduced some of these because some of them are less pressing, but again, if you have issues with testing, especially in the remote area, please contact the help desk immediately. 844-202-7853. There's the number, or it's listed at the beginning of this presentation. Really, you want to reach out to tech support immediately if you have issues. Cameras must remain on, again, for remote testing. Student cameras must remain on for testing to be valid, and be mindful of the max group 10 recommendation. Again, you can go more than that as a proctor, but we are highly recommending not doing that just because of the complexity of testing as more students enter into the test session. And then be aware, again, we've said this, these are all broken records in the sense that in terms of locations, for remote testing, you can cross locations for Smarter Balance if you have to go from in-person to remote for testing or the other way. However, for Smarter, testing should be completed in the mode that it was started. Otherwise, you're going to be starting another test. Okay, so what about appeals that have been submitted? There have been about 800 appeals submitted up to this point as of this morning. We've approved about, or rejected about 10% of them, 12% of them, and we've approved also a lot of them at about 720. Sometimes things are rejected just because there might not be enough information provided. Remember to provide as much information as you can in the text field where you can enter. Also, things might be rejected just because it might be the incorrect appeal for the situation. Here, there's an order of those that are the number of that have been requested: 384 resets, 67 reopens, so on and so forth. Again, the most common ones are the resets. If there's a situation where a student might have to have their test reset, and then also grace period extensions if you need to simply get back into a test session to see previous items. The appeals, obviously, we know happen, and they're the best way to kind of correct any situations that might have arisen during either remote or in-person testing. Couple reminders: make sure that teachers are selecting the correct test so you don't end up in an appeal situation. So for instance, don't choose a summative assessment if you're intending on doing a practice test. For some reason, that's been a popular thing this year. Again, and it continues to be popular. And don't forget that accommodations must be checked and tied for all students prior to testing to ensure that your students know how to use them in advance. If a student does not get a particular accommodation that might be in their IEP, we'll probably, and you submit an appeal, Christy Alberino is going to be asking you for some details of the administration that are outlined here. So really be mindful that if a student should be getting an accommodation, it should be set and tied, and please be aware as testing starts that they have what they need. Okay, so what about reporting? We've had a lot of interest in reporting suddenly because of the proximity towards the end of the window now. We are planning on a late June. Well, first of all, before I go through these dates, all these dates really are tentative. Given the nature of things this year, they are tentative dates, but this is what we are aiming for at this point. We're aiming for a late June release on the Cambium centralized reporting system for NGSS, SMARTER, CTAA, CTOS, in-person scores. So remote scores due to extra analysis will be held towards later in the season. However, we're shooting for late June for these scores. So we're talking basically a month from now, you'll have these scores. As I mentioned earlier, remote test reporting is still pending analysis, so we're going to hold off on that till later in the summer. And then we've had a lot of questions and interest about the ISRs. Are we getting ISRs? Are we getting ISRs? Yes, we are still planning on distributing ISRs for both in-person and remote students after Labor Day. We usually send those as a reminder. It's going to be 2 years now. As a reminder, we send those after Labor Day to districts, and then it's up to the district to distribute them in the best way that they see fit to their parents and guardians. So those are still coming. Plan on that. Those are going to be out there. And then what about the survey reporting? We've had some questions about due to the survey or because of the survey, will we be doing any specific reporting? Again, at this point, that is more for analysis purposes to discover the comparability between remote and in-person testing, as well as to see if we can detect any differences in performance between the learning models. Again, this is what I stated earlier in the presentation. So we aren't planning on reporting out on the exact items just because it's not mandatory and won't be representative of, or might not necessarily be representative of every district in the state. But again, we shall see depending on what's submitted. We are getting lots of questions and we will keep you on the loop on plans reporting. That connects to EdSite reporting. We are still, as you know, if you've been keeping an eye on things, you know that we received our waiver, so we're not doing our traditional accountability reporting. However, we still will be doing some degree of public reporting on EdSite. It will look nothing like it has in the past. We're not just pushing up like we always have the standard reports. There will be differences. We don't have any mock-ups or any samples to show you yet, but that too is coming likely later in the summer at the earliest. Okay, I think that is my last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Deirdre, who's going to talk a little bit about the late alt eligibility forms.
Great, thanks, Abe. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you this afternoon, and I hope that you and your staff and students are doing well and that you're hanging in there the last few remaining weeks of the school year. I just want to take a moment to remind you of some friendly reminders regarding our alternate assessments, as well as some other considerations for students with special needs. So in regards to your students that are eligible for the alternate assessment, we are still receiving calls daily from your teachers who are trying to access the alternate assessments for their students. And oftentimes the reason why your teachers aren't able to access the test is because an eligibility form was recently submitted, or potentially it was submitted after the February 15th deadline, but the teacher or perhaps school administrator did not have an opportunity to contact the Connecticut Help Desk. So if you are hearing this from your teachers, please ask them to check their students' Tide account and verify whether the eligibility form, first of all, that the eligibility form was submitted on behalf of their student. And then secondly, ask your teacher to verify if the alt flag indicator is activated in the student's Tide account. And if that activation does not appear, then the directive is to follow up with the Connecticut Help Desk. So certainly call Canby and let them provide them with your student's SASLID ID, and they'll go ahead and activate the flag for your student. So once that activation takes place, then your teacher will be able to access the alternate assessments, math and ELA, or if your student qualifies for the alternate science, your teacher will be able to retrieve the student score worksheet for that student in the data entry interface. And if you have any questions about that, certainly reach out to me or Janet via phone or email. And then another reminder about our students that participate in the alternate assessments. We certainly have a next slide, please. We have some students that do not have oral, let me back up. This is the slide that either you or your teacher can refer to in Tide under your student's specific Tide account. And you can see where we've indicated with a red box under status that the eligibility form has been submitted. And then we include other information such as the date that it was completed. So if you use this tool in Tide to verify the status of the eligibility form, you also want to verify the alt flag indicator. If that piece is not there, then please reach out to the Connecticut Help Desk. Next slide, please. Okay, what I prematurely began discussing was the early stopping rule for some of our students that do not have oral speech or an established mode of communication. So when we think about the 1%, around approximately 1% student population that qualifies for the alternate assessment, we certainly have a range of ability within this subgroup. And certainly there are some students that are unable to access the assessment because of their communication needs. So as a reminder, if you have students that do not have oral communication, or maybe they're newly trying out a communication device or assistive technology, and they're unable to, they do not demonstrate an established mode of communication, we have an early stopping rule procedure in place. And the directive is that the teacher attempts to administer the first 4 items of each of the alternate assessment subtests. So whether it's mathematics and English language arts and or science, if the student qualifies, we ask that the teacher attempt those first 4 items, pause the test, and then reach out to our office to process an early stopping rule. We're receiving lots of feedback from your teachers regarding the ESRs, so we know that your teachers are following this process, but certainly reach out to any new TEAs that you might be working with, or if you hear that you have colleagues in the field with questions about this, again, alert them to this process and have them reach out to us for more support. Next slide. And finally, we do have a medical exemption process for those students who are medically ill and unable to participate in school, or perhaps they're children that are hospitalized and unable to receive instructional or homebound services. So for students who are unavailable for instructional support and services due to their medical situation, and therefore they're unable to participate in testing, we do have a special process in place in which, with the completion of a form signed by the student's presiding physician and accompanied by a letter that submitted by the school district that outlines the specifics about the student's scenario, we can work with you to file a medical exemption. And this is really the only kind of exemption that we offer at the State Department of Ed regarding assessment. So it is for a specific type of situation. You know, we sometimes get these requests for students who have recent concussions or other medical situations where kids are attending school maybe part-time or for a brief duration. And, you know, we can work with you, we can offer some suggestions as far as how to handle those particular cases, but typically those students do not qualify for a medical exemption. If you have any questions, you think you have a student that might qualify, reach out to us. Or if you have kids that have a temporary medical emergency, such as broken collarbones, broken hands, arms, etc., we will work with you to provide an emergency special documented accommodation for your students. So again, reach out to us if you have any special circumstances that arise with your students, especially as we're nearing the end of the testing window. Thank you. And then finally, this is a slide familiar to you. We highlighted some resources, or sort of like a focal point as to where you can access information regarding accessibility supports and accommodations for your students, as well as information on the alternate assessments, and then of course brochures and quick guides. And if you're ever wondering if there is a particular document that exists, or you've seen something before but you're not quite sure where to find it, let us know and we'll point you in the right direction. Okay, this is the moment where we'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks. Thank you, Dee. Yeah, and I don't see any questions in our question box this week. I think this would be the first week of office hours where we haven't had any, so we can always set new records here for the lowest number of questions at an office hours. But if you have any questions, we'll give you a minute here. Could be anything about testing here. We'd love to help you out and type them in. Keep in mind that not only to the CSDE team is here, but also the CAI team, the Cambium team. So if you have a question that might be more technically oriented towards the systems, you can certainly answer those. Oh, I see a raised hand. Let's see. Hey, Michelle, are you on by chance still? Can you help?
Yeah, I'm on. Sorry. I was
Yeah.
didn't realize that somebody had their hand raised. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, Sheila, I'm gonna unmute you. So hold on. All right, Sheila, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Sheila.
Yeah, no, I had no question. I was trying to do in the chat just to thank you guys for doing this every week. It's been really helpful to keep us up to date with what's going on and answer questions as they come up. So I was trying to find the chat and accidentally hit the hand, sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sheila.
And
thanks.
Sheila, you know, I do want to say that, like, on behalf of your administrators and then, you know, administrators from across the state, like your Their staff has been so dedicated and committed to doing the best job that they can, on behalf of their students, and to make sure that testing runs as smoothly as possible. And while we're fielding calls all day, it is evident for the most part that there's just a tremendous amount of hard work and effort in that your teachers are placing into the hands of their students to make testing work as smoothly as possible. So we want to certainly extend our thanks to all of you. We know this has been such an intense and stressful year and a half, and we're with you in the home stretch. We really appreciate everything that you've put into making this testing window possible.
Thanks, T. So I'll give it a proper weight here. Anybody wants to type anything in? Any questions about? We'll open it up to anything in the department, and then I'll have to find my colleagues who know the answer, but that's probably a dangerous ask here. No, seriously, if it's not testing related, you can always email me. We'd be glad even to help you out with that regard. And we do have a question that has come in. It's a general question, but I'd love to comment on. The question is, how has remote testing been going? We could probably do a webinar just on that alone, but I know, so remember remote testing, we definitely go back to the hierarchy where in-person first, then if you are remote, try to have those students come in, and then if students who can't come in, those students would qualify as remote testers. We've actually found that a lot of districts have been, and it ranges, I think, to be totally honest with you, but I think a lot of districts have found success in having their students come in. There's obviously some students either due to health risks or other reasons that simply can't do it. And so those students, and then districts that haven't been as successful, those students are being tested remotely. We have heard, we've heard a lot of success stories. We've also heard due to just the bandwidth issues and the amount of space we need from the students, the computers, there have been some challenges, but I think the CAI Help Desk has done a nice job trying to help mediate those. And we've taken a lot of calls on our office, from our office, about them. So it's going. The numbers, I don't have a number for you, but it's a lot. The percentage wise, we'll obviously know once the window closes, but there has been a decent percentage of students tested remotely. And again, we are trying to abide by many of the protocols, the in-person, to keep using the secure browser, having the camera on, having the tools in the remote proctoring station, just to keep the security the same as in person. And it's been working pretty well. So it's good. We will have obviously after June 4th, we'll have a better idea. Okay, I'll wait another minute here for questions. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming. To echo what Deirdre said, we know you're working hard, and we really appreciate that. So thank you for taking the time, half an hour, to join us this afternoon. Thank you to my colleagues on the call, Deirdre and Michelle from CSDE, who joined us today, as well as Jen and Marie from Cambium. Thanks for being here this afternoon. We will be here for 2 more weeks, and have a nice afternoon and be safe. Thank you.
Great, thank you everyone. Bye.